Hi there everybody, it's Chris van die Kerk here at Blue Rhino Safaris. One of the things that irks me a little bit is every time I hear travelers, international travelers, traveling across borders into Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and the officials at the border post or maybe at the veterinary gate inside of the country stops them and they want to check the fridge, and they start going through the fridge and they confiscate certain things that you're not allowed to have with you. And I've heard all the stories of people taking out their meat and throwing it on the ground and jumping on it and making it inedible. And by that, making an absolute fool of themselves to do that because they think the people are going through their fridges just to take stuff to eat. And it's false. And I'm going to quickly go through foot and mouth for you so that you understand what it's all about. And when you get to the border or the veterinary fence and the guys go through your stuff, that you understand what the issue is. I think misinformation is the biggest problem that we have in this case. And don't make a fool of yourself by acting in a certain way just because you don't actually understand what's going on. So let me take a few minutes to take you through how it works and what the purpose of it is, and then we can understand when we get to a border why are they searching my fridge or why are they not searching my fridge, for example. So let's start by, I'm sure you've heard of something called COVID-19. If you have heard of COVID-19, it is a virus that is very infectious towards humans that can cause serious harm and even death. So the human population has been put through the ringer with COVID-19. Foot and mouth disease is the COVID-19 for cloven-hooved animals. Goats, sheep, buffalo, cattle, pigs, all of the cloven-hooved animals suffer from this virus, and that virus is transmittable. Like in COVID cases, it's transmittable through saliva, through contact with fluids, blah, 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 blah. You know the story. It's a virus. If you go to the World Organization of Animal Health, it will tell you that the signs can range from mild or inapparent to severe. And what it does is vesicles and blisters on the tongue, dental pad, gums, cheek, hard and soft palate, lips, nostrils. This really makes the animal very sick. So sick that if you carry on a little bit further, they say morbidity can approach 100%. Generally in adult animals, it's not an issue, but in younger calves and youngsters, it is very serious and they can die of it. So death aside, highly productive dairy breeds have the most severe clinical signs. So if you enjoy your cheese and your milk and your butter, then this disease can affect that. The complications, tongue erosions, infections of the hooves, hoof deformation, mastitis, which is a milk-producing infection, permanent impairment of milk production, myocarditis, infection of the heart surrounding or something there, infertility, abortion, permanent loss of weight, and the loss of heat control. Now this is what the animal has to suffer when it catches this disease called foot and mouth disease. So the point of this is not that it is unsafe for a human to eat. Human can get this, but it's very rare that humans will actually contract it. If you are constantly exposed to it and you constantly get the virus in, yes, there's a chance that you can get it. But if you eat a piece of meat that is infected with foot and mouth on cattle, then you're not going to get sick the chance very rare that you will get sick. You get a condition in humans which is called hand, foot and mouth disease, which is something similar to this, but it's not linked. It's not the same thing. So the point of foot and mouth disease control isn't so much as people are concerned. It's more got to do with the animals. It's their COVID-19 that you are busy spreading if you disregard the foot and mouth controls. So with that in mind, let's have a quick look and I'll explain to you how it works and what the point of this whole thing is. We've now seen that it is a disease that spreads through the feces of animals. You get it in all cloven-hoofed animals. And the biggest issue generally is the control of animals in an area and whether you vaccinate or you don't vaccinate. Now, let's say you're sitting in Europe and you have a contract with Botswana to provide meat into the EU. You're in Europe, you're a pig farmer, you have 1,000 pigs on your farm, and that's your business. That's the thing that you do. You go to the local shop, you feel like a bit of beef, you buy a piece of beef that comes from Botswana, you enjoy Botswana beef, and you cook your beef. You take the bag which the beef comes in, you throw it in the dustbin, and a little piglet or something outside finds that bag, licks from the blood in the bag, and catches the disease. Your 1,000 pigs on your farm suddenly exposed to foot and mouth because you don't vaccinate, because foot and mouth disease is not in Europe. They don't have an issue with foot and mouth disease because they are isolated, they protect themselves. And suddenly you have foot and mouth and you wipe out that farmer, you wipe out his living, and you've just caused consternation. And that comes because the food that you brought in, the raw meat that you brought into the area, have now introduced foot and mouth disease into your country or into the European Union for that matter. And the EU do have a contract with Botswana for the meat production and meat supply into the EU. And the last time that Botswana received a ban on import of raw meat was in 2022, when they had a foot and mouth outbreak in Botswana and all meat production stopped. So Botswana's economy took a hit, and the EU didn't get their meat like they should have for many years. So it is a serious issue because they don't want their animals and their farmers to be exposed to foot and mouth disease. And that's why when we travel through Botswana, specifically, we have all these controls. Namibia is the same as Zambia sometimes, but Zimbabwe sometimes, South Africa sometimes. Because what you are trying to prevent is the movement of raw meat out of a foot and mouth area. So if you look at the Botswana map, then the main foot and mouth areas are around the wildlife areas. Because buffalo travel freely and buffalo carry foot and mouth disease, it means wherever you travel from a buffalo area, they will need to search you and make sure that you don't have any meat that comes from that area. Now, there's nothing stopping a person to buy local cheap Botswana beef and putting a South African sticker on it and taking it home because he thinks this is going to save him a few bucks. So they cannot allow any beef through that comes from that buffalo area, even if it's in a Woolies pack with a Woolies sticker on it, because someone could have wangled the system. It is raw meat and it has the potential to infect the animals that are in a free zone where there's no real foot and mouth. Because they don't want to vaccinate all their cattle, it's very expensive and it's a big job to do. They only vaccinate in areas where there's a real threat. The areas that doesn't have a real threat, vaccination is not a big thing because there is no foot and mouth in that area. But now some idiot decided he wanted cheap beef and he's going to take Woolworths packages and seal them and bring a lot of beef back from Kasane or wherever. And again, that exposes the animals in the southern part of Botswana. And therefore, you now have an issue. So whenever you leave an area of foot and mouth, you will be checked and they will take your stuff because foot and mouth is prevalent. And that goes for anything that touches the possible feces of a bull or of cattle or buffalo or anything. So if you were in a buffalo area or in a cattle area, the soles of your shoes, the wheels of the tires, the treads of the tires, those things have all been in contact with possible foot and mouth contamination, and therefore they get sprayed. You have to stamp your feet when you go through Botswana. They take your raw meat. Once you've cooked it, the virus is dead, and therefore there's no issue. So you cook your meat, you take it through, and the virus is dead, and you're good. The problem that you always have is you are never quite sure that the meat that you are eating is free of foot and mouth or not, because humans don't really get it. We don't hear that, oh, in Vryheid and Natal there's been a breakout because people started getting the disease. No, we first hear that the cattle has picked up the disease, but there might already have been some of that food in the system that made it to the shelves of the local store. So therefore, the only way to really handle it is to be careful with some intelligence around it. So if you come from a buffalo area going south, then you will be checked. Going north, they generally have vaccination areas for cattle. There's not a lot of cattle farmers in the north because it's so prevalent and they have to vaccinate in the north. So if you travel to the north, they rarely check your food because you are going into infected areas. So, you know, there's no real issue from that. But if you come out of that infected area, they want to check you to prevent the spread of the disease going further. And the same goes for South Africa. We don't always realize it, but South Africa also have foot and mouth zones. And here you can see on our map in South Africa, the highly infected areas, Kruger National Park, because of all the buffalo. The protection zone where they are probably vaccinating and keeping an eye out for meat. There's not much meat that should be coming from Kruger. So that shouldn't be an issue, but they are pretty careful. And up in the Northern Natal area, Cozy Bay, in that area, same story. There's buffalo in the area. And then you can see there's a high surveillance area, which is this dark blue all around the country, where they are just concerned about what goes where. Now you can see Botswana sits up here at the top. So the top gates where you go into Botswana from this area, which is a foot and mouth area for South Africa, are the gates that are more operational when you go into Botswana. Our Capetonian friends, when they come up and they enter Botswana from this side, there's no foot and mouth in the Cape region. There's no issues down here. And therefore, they can enter Botswana normally without even being searched. So if you use the top gates to go into Botswana, then they consider you coming from a foot and mouth area, and therefore they will check your fridge and take your meat because you are now bringing it into this area, which is a foot and mouth free area. And that is what you have when you do that. The same goes for Namibia. Generally foot and mouth free. Their foot and mouth zone is generally at the top in the Caprivi area. If you know the red line, I've spoken to about it on other videos. It's above Etosha because Etosha has buffalo. And as soon as you have buffalo, you have foot and mouth disease somewhere. So anything coming out of Etosha going south, which is a foot and mouth free zone, they want to take it. They don't allow it through. But if you go into the foot and mouth zone, into the Etosha or north of Etosha, then they say, well, this is already now a wildlife area, so there is foot and mouth, so it doesn't matter if you take food in there. And that's the point. So if you enter Namibia through the south from South Africa's side, then they are very sensitive for foot and mouth entering Namibia in the south. And therefore you will get checked down here for going in with meat, especially if there's a little bit of a breakout in South Africa because we are not well controlled, or if there's also wildlife out here, buffalo just north of Gaborone. So they will be careful of anything that possibly made its way through here. And that's the point of it. So when you get to the gate and they say, hand over your Woolies steaks that you paid 250 Rand a kilo for or whatever, and you say, well, I won't because you are just going to eat it. Yeah, sure, they can eat it. There's no problem with that, generally speaking, because we know that it should be safe. We know that humans really can't get the disease. So for them to eat it is generally not the issue. The issue is you are not allowed to take that meat through that zone. That's it. That's what the point is. So don't say they took my meat just because they wanted to eat it. If they eat it, they eat it. They take the risk. It's their problem. It's not the issue. The issue is you are not allowed to take the meat through, because if it's contaminated and it was missed somewhere along the health system of animals, and that little piece of meat slipped through, the bag fell onto the ground, and that disease now infected Botswana, then suddenly they are cut off from the EU and they cannot export food, and a big part of their income is gone. So please, the next time that you go through the border or you go through the zones and they ask you to check, please be mindful of the fact that it is the COVID of animals that they are trying to prevent. Animals suffer because of this. Animals are the ones paying the price and dying. Stop producing milk. All these deformities because of this virus that is carried by meat. So I know what people do when they get to borders. One, don't make a fool out of yourself. Two, be very responsible towards your neighbors and people that rely on animals for a living. So make sure to think about it. There are ways to do it, and we've discussed it before in other videos, but that is the crux of the whole thing. If you didn't know, now you know. And that's it. I hope you understand it a little bit better, and I hope it makes a bit of sense. Drive safe, travel safe, until we see each other on the next trip.